Josh, Spurgeon said, pray like the house is on fire. And it's really important for us to be diligent about praying that way for each other. And at times it's run through my mind here and here. And, you know, so Marcy, we definitely want to be praying like the house is on fire. Yeah. I want to go back to a couple of verses from last week, and then we really are going to go to Revelation tonight. I think we all have forgot what book we were in. Yes, John, we really are. So I want to go back to 2 Corinthians 1, and I want to read 8 through 10 again. I don't really want to read it. I want one of you to read it.
We do 2 Corinthians?
Yes, sir.
We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts, we felt the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him, we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us.
And last week when we looked at that verse, we talked about the things that Paul, and it was a we, so whoever else was with him at this point in time, the things that they went through to come to a different place. And what are the words that Paul uses to describe his circumstances?
That they were under circumstances they didn't think they could endure.
Yes. So their strength was gone. And sure, as we suffer with the challenges we face, there are times where we feel like our strength is gone. And he also is honest about the trouble that he went through. And how did he describe that trouble? He used some words in there to describe it.
It says we felt the sentence of death.
Okay, we felt the sentence of death.
Burdened excessively.
Burdened excessively. What else?
Under great pressure.
Great pressure. That might be affliction in mind in the real version of the Bible, but anyway. And the result of the things that they were going through created what? What would they have done if they didn't change as they went through that? What would they have done?
Given up.
They would have despaired of life. That's what he used. And there's many times when we go through our challenges, we get to that edge and we think, I'm despairing of life because it's just too much. It's just too hard. And so that's what their experience was. And as God, but the result of their experience, and this is what we said last week, Paul and whoever was with him had to go through these things for this result. And what does he say was the result of going through this process?
They were relying on God.
They trusted
They
God.
had to rely on God.
Yeah, they trusted God. And as their trust in God grew, they also had something else that escapes us when we're going through challenges. What did they have?
Hope.
Hope. And so somehow through the way that God created trust, it also created hope. And they experienced, because they continued to walk through this difficult situation, what did they experience in the outcome? In verse 10.
That God continued to deliver to them.
Yeah, he delivered them from what was threatening, literally threatening their lives. And what else did he say? And so out of the trust that grew in his relationship with God, they did experience, and there are times when we walk through stuff like, I don't want to do another step on this path. It's too difficult, it's too harsh, it's too frightening. And here is the reminder that as trust grows, hope grows, and the ability to trust God for that next step. And then let's go to 2 Corinthians 4, and then we're going to go to Colossians, then we really are going to Revelation. But this struck me when I read this verse this week. It's just a couple chapters later. I don't know how much time passed between chapter 1 and chapter 4 here. But look what he writes in, let's read 8. 8 and 9.
We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body.
So as they faced the challenging circumstances they were in, the result of the way that they walked with God through those challenges was what? What was the result?
They were always able to rise above it.
Okay, they were able to rise above it, but what does he say in verse 10? What was the end result of the way they walked through their challenge?
So that the life of Jesus can be revealed through
Yeah.
them.
And God was using the challenges they were facing so that his life could be revealed through the way that they were walking through it, which is not normal. This is not a normal response, because what are they saying that they went through? And what I want you to do is think in your mind what we just read in chapter 1, and a couple of those words are actually in these verses. And what does he say? What does he say that reminds us of what we read in chapter 1?
But it was very difficult times.
Okay.
They were afflicted, perplexed, persecuted, forsaken.
Okay. And he said afflicted. I want you to be aware that we were afflicted. And here he's using this same, and we don't know if it's the same circumstances, different circumstances, we don't know. But he's using the word, we were afflicted, but what has happened by the response? In chapter 1, we despaired of life. Here, in that affliction, what has happened in the response?
They're not.
They're realizing that they're
And
trusting
not,
God.
not in despair, like in desperate situations, but not.
Yes, it's not taking them to that place that they were before in their challenge. Go ahead.
Witnessing for Jesus.
Yes, they were witnessing for Jesus, and certainly the way that they were handling and walking through their circumstances, they didn't want those circumstances any more than we do. But what he's saying is that, hey, we were afflicted, but now that affliction, it wasn't destroying us, as you said, Nate. And then he uses the word that, hey, we were perplexed, but we weren't going to that despairing place. So what are we seeing? Joe's answering service. What are we seeing?
Growth of faith.
Yeah, we are actually literally seeing the growth of faith in his life. And then he also, if you look at verse 16, what does he say in 16 and 17 in this chapter?
Therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all.
And so their perspective, their faith, their trust in God is also moving them away from their comfort to what?
Peace.
To peace. And what else? What do they have a view of?
Eternal glory.
Eternal glory. That is helping them as they walk through this very difficult situation. Then let's turn to Colossians 1. This is the last verse I want to look at, and then we're going to go to Revelation chapter 8. I don't know what verse yet because I don't have this written down. I think it's 10, but it might be 9.
So that you may walk,
Through 11. Yeah, go ahead.
10 through 11,
Yes,
so that
please.
you may walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. to-
Go back 9, 10, and 11.
Okay.
Thank you. That was free.
For this reason also, since the day we heard of it, we have not ceased to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so that you may walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for the attaining of all steadfastness and patience, joyously giving thanks to the Father.
Okay, look at verse 11, and I want you to relate that to what we just looked at in 2 Corinthians. All of those are important because he is saying we are praying for God to give you wisdom to walk through what you're walking through. What you're walking through is not easy. And so we're praying for God to give you wisdom and knowledge so that you can respond out of the wisdom and knowledge of God. But look at verse 11, and I think this is so important for us as we walk through challenges. What do we see? That he's praying.
That we would be strengthened with all power
And for what purpose?
for the attaining of steadfastness and patience.
For the attaining of steadfastness and patience. When we get to the end of what we can do, and Paul was praying for them, and we need to pray this for each other, and that is that God will strengthen us. Remember, he said we were out of strength, and so he's telling them, after experiencing this in his own life, hey, I was out of strength, but he's telling them that they can be strengthened. And what is the end result of the strengthening?
Attaining steadfastness and patience.
Aren't those high on your list and mine when you're going through a really difficult time?
And my scripture says endurance.
Endurance. God is about that, is part of our struggling and suffering and what we're trying to get through. Just want to wake me up when it's over. He's about strengthening us, causing us to be more enduring, causing us to be more patient while we live here. And we don't always value that, appreciate, but we need that. And so I just wanted to be sure and put that out there on the heels of what we talked about last week as we go through things we don't want to go through. Did you have something to say?
Joyously.
Joyously. Thank you for adding that.
What's really hard for me is like realizing that all of these people were just going through the persecution of the Roman Empire, and depending on whoever the emperor was, maybe being dragged out into the streets and loved ones being killed, and having their scriptures taken away and burned and stuff like that. I know there were times where it just got really bad.
Yeah, and that is a really good point because that is the environment that Christianity was growing in. And that these guys were definitely enduring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Paul got it not only from the Romans, but he also got it from his Jewish
people.
Yeah, his own people. So it wasn't just Paul, it was other people too. But anyway, okay, thanks. Okay, turn with me to Revelation chapter 8. And this is the last chapter that we looked at. We're just going to do a little bit of a review because it's been 4 weeks. And I just wanted to tell you that 4 weeks that we went in a different direction, we're going to find that that's exactly how God talked to John, because he's going to have things be in chronological order. And then it's almost like, well, you're going back here, you're talking about this and giving us more details about this time frame. And so it kind of is like that too. It's like a pause and explaining more or going in a direction that you know, that you felt, or that John, he wanted John to go in. He wanted to provide him more information that he skipped. So let's look at chapter 8. There's only 13 verses in this chapter. I don't intend to read all of it, but this is just for the sake of reviewing. What does chapter 8 shift to?
Looking at the 7 seals.
This is the 7th seal. So
Or
it's
the
going,
7th
yeah,
seal.
we've already looked at the 6th. This is the 7th seal, and what do we find out about the 7th seal? It contains,
7 angels and 7 trumpets.
yep, 7 trumpets. So this is the 7th seal. These 7 trumpets are part of, these judgments are part of the 7th seal, the 7th seal, okay? So we saw, and there's so many scenes in heaven, and we saw that these trumpets were ready to blow their trumpet, but we also saw, and I think it's verse 5, yeah, what do we see happens in verse 5? Besides these 7 angels with the 7 trumpets, what do we see in verse 5?
That's where the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar that was the saints' prayers
Right.
for the fuel
Yeah, that's exactly right. And he threw it where?
to the earth.
To the earth. And that starts the blowing of the 7 trumpets. What was that, John?
He's just talking, Janet, go ahead.
Okay. So I want us to look at, I want to go through the first angel. There's 4 angels. 4 trumpets are blown in chapter 8. I want to do a description of it. I didn't write these, and it's the right way to remember this chapter is to go, these are the 1/3 judgments. That's what happens with these trumpets being blown. Everything's a third. Okay? So let's look at verse 7. What do we see? We don't have to read it. You can just tell me. This is the first trumpet. What happens when the first trumpet is blown?
A third of the trees are burned up.
Okay, 1/3 of the trees. What else?
And all the green grass.
Green grass. What else?
So a third of the earth was burned up.
Okay.
Midland already fits that description.
Right.
It will in July.
Okay, so then let's look at verse 8. We've got the second angel blowing a trumpet, and what's the result of the second angel blowing the trumpet?
A great mountain falls into the sea that's burning,
Okay,
and a third of the sea becomes blood.
so 1/3 of the sea, and what else happens?
A third of the living creatures died.
Yep, there's animals, there's creatures, that's a better word, but I started animals, so bear with me. That's probably in Misty's paraphrase.
Third of the boats.
A third of the boats. And we think it's tsunamis and so the economy, I mean, so many factors. So 1/3 of everything. And then the third trumpet is in 10. So the third trumpet, and what happens when the third trumpet blows?
A great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on the third of the rivers and on the springs of the water.
So it fell in the rivers and springs, and what does that mean? They lost?
Fresh water.
Yeah, fresh water. And then the fourth angel in verse 12. times where the things that are happening on the earth is actually darkening the sun, the moon, the stars, and so this is another situation where that description is there. And what else does he say? How much of,
A third of the stars
Yeah.
are dark.
yeah. So basically they're losing what?
Light.
Yeah, a third of the day?
And a third of the night.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what's already taken place. And then look at verse 13, and let's read verse 13.
As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels."
So this is pretty bad, right? It's hard for us to even imagine how bad this is and that people are living through that. Although we do live in Midland, and so we get a taste of it, as you said. Okay, so, but if we think about that, and then we think about, what does he say in verse 13?
It's about to get worse.
It's gonna get worse. And how many woes are there? Because why?
There's three woes.
Yep, and why?
3 remaining angels.
Yep, there's 3 trumpets to be blown. Okay, so let's go and read Revelation 9, 1 and 2.
And the first angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven, which had fallen to the earth. And the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit.
Okay, so we want to be able to get the details out of here, and what do we find out is what happens?
The stars fall from heaven to earth.
I'm not trying to do that. Okay, a star falls from heaven, and then what do we find out about that star?
It has the key,
To
the abyss.
abyss or bottomless pit. Okay, what else do we see?
He opens the pit.
He opens the pit. And what happens?
Smoke rises.
Okay,
So much that it darkened the sun.
okay. So we've seen John describe several falling stars. We just read another one in 8, and we've seen him describe several times falling stars. What's different about the description of this falling star?
He almost makes it sound alive since it has a key that opens.
Okay, so there's some, and then, okay, so you're going in the right direction. What else makes that person sound, or that personality sound alive? Not a star.
Represents intelligent creature.
What?
Star represents intelligent creature.
Okay, an intelligent creature, that's true.
It had
Which
a name.
you talked about last time too.
Yes, we did. We did. But what other help do we get to know how to look at that star as different than a star falling, literal star falling from heaven?
It's called,
Says
it calls it
when he opened.
He opened.
He and him. So clearly, John wants us to not look at this as a literal star, but as a personality. He and him. And then there's an action, which Josh said, and that action was to do what? He opened the pit. Okay. So let's go back. Let's read Job 38:7, and we want to read Isaiah, and we want to see what creatures are described as a star. We've read these before, but we're going to go ahead and go back. So Job 38:7 and Isaiah 14.
Romeo.
Romeo, what you talking about, dude? What does Job 38:7 say?
When the morning stars sing together,
Okay, talks about the morning stars
and all the sons of God shouted for joy.
and all the sons of God shouted for joy. And when we looked earlier, a couple of weeks ago in the book of Job, we found out that someone appeared with the sons of God. Who was that appeared with the sons of God?
Satan?
Satan did, exactly. And so we have these phrases of star, and we also read in Revelation chapter 12, which we're going to look at one place in just a minute, twice in there, Satan is referred to as what? Once in there, I lied. A star. Okay. And sweeping a third of the stars from heaven in Revelation chapter 12. Okay, let's look at Isaiah 14. Dallas plays tonight. Go Stars, I'm just kidding. What does Isaiah 14, 12 through 14 say?
How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, the son of the morning, how are you cut down to the ground? You who weaken the nations, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest side of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
Okay, and so that is a description of Satan and his attitude and what happened to him, and what description that would relate to star do we see in these verses? How is he described? Let me ask it that way. How is he described?
Fallen from heaven.
Fallen from heaven.
Son of the morning.
Son of the morning.
When it says morning star.
Morning star.
Jesus said that too, that he saw Satan fall like lightning.
Yep. His disciples did, but they were saying that to Jesus. Yep, that's exactly right. Okay, so let's go back to Revelation chapter 9. And we can't emphatically 100% say that this is Satan, but it certainly seems to fit the bill that this is Satan. And as we continue to go through, it seems to reinforce even more that this is Satan that's being talked about. Okay? So let's read, let's go to Revelation 12, 7 through 9. And we've read this a couple of times.
And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him.
Okay. So there is a point in time where we know Satan no longer has access to heaven. He is thrown down to earth. When we get to chapter 12, we'll dig into that more. But we've got a couple of chapters to do before we get there. But we see that event, him being thrown down to the earth, could definitely explain what we're looking at here in chapter 9. Okay, so let's see. What is given to Satan? We've already answered it, but what is he given?
Key to the pit.
Yeah, and he is given, what does that tell you? Who gives it to him? It has to be God giving him. It's not something he could take It's not something, it was actually given to him. So this is unfolding, as horrific as it is unfolding under the sovereign control and planning of God. Okay, so let's see what the bottomless pit is. Let's turn to Revelation 9, 11, and 12. What do we see about the bottomless pit or the abyss? What do you have there, Misty? Is it the abyss or bottomless pit in your version?
Oh, for 9.
In 11.
11 says, I don't see anything.
That's okay.
King James says bottomless pit.
It does say bottomless pit, okay. And
Yeah.
mine says abyss, I don't, but we should have,
Abyss. It
yeah,
says
abyss, okay. So let's read 11 and 12. What are we gonna find out details about that bottomless pit? What can we add to it?
And they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek his name is Apollyon. One woe is past, behold, still 2 more woes are coming after these things.
Okay, so what's the additional description that we have that sheds some light on this bottomless pit?
They had a king.
Had a king, and that king was,
My Bible says it means destroyer.
okay, destroyer, okay, yeah, and that king is described as a what? And then we'll come back to that, Ed.
Angel.
An angel. So we know that this is housing, potentially housing, we're going to dig into it more, angels. And there's somebody that's in charge of those angels, and his name is, you said, Ed, destroyer. What does anybody else have?
Said Abaddon and Apollyon.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, and he's using 2 words that would be referred to a Gentile and referred to as a Jew. So both of those phrases are to say, okay, this is a tormentor of Jews and Gentiles. Okay, and we know it's an angel because he tells us that. Okay, so let's go, let's look at Luke 8, 30 and 32.
And Jesus asked him, what is your name? And
Better
he-
go up to 28. Sorry.
28.
Yeah, to 32.
And seeing Jesus, he cried out, and he fell before him, and said in a loud voice, what do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me.
Okay, so can I interrupt you and see, look at verse 27, and we find out that he's describing a demon-possessed person. Okay, sorry about that, Elaine.
That's
So
okay.
if you want to go to 29.
And he had been commanding the unclean spirits to come out of the man, he being God or Jesus.
Yes.
For it had seized him many times, and he was bound with chains and shackles and kept underground. And yet he would burst his fetters and be driven by the demons into the desert. And Jesus asked him, what is your name? And he said, Legion, for many demons had entered him. And they were entreating him not to command them to depart into the abyss. And there was a herd of many swines feeding on the mountain, and the demons entreated him to permit them to enter the swine, and he did give them permission.
And then 33 kind of finishes the
And the
verse.
demons came out from the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned.
Okay, so what do those demons, we know what they are, what do they ask? They're possessing a person and causing all kinds of havoc in that person's life. What do they say when Jesus is casting those demons out of the man? What do they say?
Don't make them go back to the abyss.
Don't make us go to the abyss. Please do this, okay? So that also gives us an understanding of the abyss, and what is that? Demons don't want to go there.
It's real bad.
It's the worst of the worst that are housed in the abyss. Okay? Yeah.
Let me ask a question. This is probably really stupid. So are the fallen angels, is there a difference? I mean, I always thought demons were the bad angels. Is that a different entity?
I don't think it is, Ed, but I think it's worth looking into to clarify that. So I'm like you. I just kind of lump them all together, but clearly we're finding as we read this, there are some that are worse than others.
And it's weird because Jesus actually doesn't send them. He
I know.
allows them to
I know.
remain on the earth.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if they went into the pigs and then once the pigs died, they still went out into the air. Because I know Jesus also says that whenever the house is cleaned and the spirit leaves, it tries to return back with someone stronger to take possession of the same house. And
Yes.
so he says they wander through dry places looking for a person. But it is kind of strange. It doesn't really say why he allows them to stay, and some of them do go to the abyss.
Yeah, he doesn't tell us.
If I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, you are, Josh. Those are good points.
So is the abyss, could be the bottomless pit?
Yes, they are one and the
Yeah,
same. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're the same too,
Yeah.
because I was just looking up on Blue Letter Bible, the first verse we read in Revelation, was it chapter 9?
Uh-huh.
And the word for bottomless pit in the Greek is abyssos.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
I think
Okay.
that's why some translations have it a little more closer.
Okay, thank you for adding that. Okay, so let's turn to Revelation 21 through 3. What do we see 21 through 3?
I have another question though. So, like the first 4 trumpets seem to be kind of natural, right? And they do seem to very strongly indicate chronological order. But once you get to the 5th, which is the first woe, right? Would that still be kind of literal? Like this is a specific time when that pit is opened? Or does it seem a little different from the rest? Like it's more
It is, and we'll get into.
spiritual?
Yes, there
That's
you go. You're
strange
going
to
in.
me.
No.
Okay.
You're going in absolutely the right direction,
Didn't mean to get
because
ahead of you.
everything, the first 4 trumpets are affecting the earth, all of that. But now there is a shift, and we're seeing that shift, and we'll continue to see that as we keep reading. But it is shifting to a spiritual torment, along with the physical torment that they're dealing with on the earth. Okay, so let's read Revelation 21 through 3.
And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss, and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil, or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss, and locked and sealed it over him, to keep him from deceiving the nations until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time.
And we are going to look at all of that stuff when we get to chapter 20. But what do we find out about the bottomless pit?
someone else got the key.
Someone else got a key, and that someone else is who?
It says an angel.
An angel?
Is that like one of the archangels?
Yeah, we don't know, but it's an angel, has the key now, and is coming from where?
Heaven.
Yep, coming down from heaven. Okay, and then his job, and fascinates me, which is part of why I wanted to look at angels and Satan more is how involved they are in all the things that God is doing in the book of Revelation. So what's his job?
To find the dragon.
Basically sit on the devil for 1,000 years.
Yeah, he's throwing it. He threw the devil in there, locked him up for 1,000 years in this abyss that we're talking about right here. Okay, then let's turn to 2 Peter 2:4, and we could go farther down this road. I'm not going to do that, but we could. But 2 Peter 2:4, and let's see what we find out there.
For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment.
Okay, so it seems like in something that they did that is worse than what some others did, they got locked up in this place. And there's someone in charge over them, and now Satan has the key. He goes and unlocks the pit, and what happens? Let's go back to Revelation 9.
So this is kind of like a crazy thing, right? Like the spiritual beings fighting over who can set these guys free or keep them in there, almost, to me. Like Satan thinks he's winning for a while, thinking, oh, I'm just gonna set these guys free that God locked up a long time ago.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
And there could be, but we also, we can see again, like, and along with that thought is like, he energized Herod to kill all the babies under 2. If he could find a way to thwart God's plan,
Right,
then he would win.
right.
And it seems like that's part of what we're looking at. Plus, as we've said the last 2 weeks, he hates God, he hates people, and he hates the relationship that people have with God. So that's the target of his activity. So he does, what does he do with the key? What does he do with the key?
Opens it.
He opens it, and then we've got what? What happens when he opens it?
He gets thrown.
The smoke roses.
Smoke rises.
Yeah, smoke
Dark.
rises. Yeah, okay. So let's read 3 through 5 of chapter 9.
Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power, as a scorpion of the earth had power. They were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green thing, or any tree, but only those men who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Read down to what?
5.
And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like a torment of the scorpion when it striketh a man.
Okay, so what happens when he sees the smoke rise? What does he describe as being in that smoke?
Locusts.
Yeah, and if locusts, I read about one time where locusts, a 2,000 mile stretch of locusts, and I mean, what do they look like when they're all compacted together? Yeah, they almost do look like smoke. So it could be, yeah, there literally was smoke coming out, but you literally could have that sense of all of these things coming out of the pit. And so he uses a word to describe what's coming out of the pit. And what comparison does he use? What does he compare him to?
Scorpions.
He does use that as the stinger, so he's making a comparison there, but he's also talking about who is being released from the pit and what he compared them to.
The gigantic furnace?
Say what?
A gigantic furnace?
He does talk about that like a
Locusts
furnace.
come out of the smoke.
Yes, the locusts come out. So he's using the locusts. And if we're not going to go read it because we're running a little bit behind, but in Exodus 10, that's where the plagues, and one of the plagues was locusts. and covering and devouring, and that locusts will naturally do what? Eat everything, strip it to nothing. And yet, what do we find out that tells us these are different? And what does he say about these locusts?
We were told not to harm the grass or the earth or any plant or tree.
Okay,
Or
so
feed on men.
yeah, exactly. That's what they're going, and that's not natural for a locust. Plus, you've got intense heat coming out of the space where they were, and so consequently, no, it has to be a comparison, and that we could kind of get a picture in our head, because there's no way it could be a literal locust. But he wants to give us that picture.
Or a literal hybrid creature of
Yes.
a locust and
Yes.
a scorpion or something weird.
Yeah, something weird, okay? But he's using those because he's trying to get us a message about who these are.
But they went after the people, it says, who did not have the seal of God on their forehead.
Yeah, and we'll get to that here in just 1 second. But they're told not to, and then so how long are they going to be tormenting?
5 months.
5 months. Okay, so we definitely have that, and let's look at verse 6. What are we going to find out about the torment that people are enduring because
During
of
those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them.
Okay, so during this 5-month period,
There's no death.
they can't die. But it is extremely tormenting. And we just read about one person who was inhabited by demons, and he could break chains, but he could not. And we could read other places where thrown into a fire, and just these uncontrollable ways that the demons are possessing and controlling their lives. And some reason, however it plays out, they are not able. They're in so much agony, they're not able to even end their own life.
It's almost like the locusts, their spirits were in bondage, and now they're free to kind of bring everyone into their prison with them, in a sense.
Yeah.
So men are bound
Yes,
by them.
that's a good picture.
Maybe.
And so we see, Satan at some point in time is going to be thrown down. The angels with him after a war in heaven. You've got these demons or angels, whatever they are, coming up out of the pit. And then we have demons and angels that are bad angels that are functioning on the earth. So we have this event, this supernatural event of spiritual torment. They've already had more of the physical torment, but this is the situation that these people are in. So you said, Misty, what the limitations are. They were given limitations. It also gives us a sense of, hey, these are thinking. They get it. They know they have limitations, and they're told what those limitations are, and they're going to respect the limitations that God places on them. What are the limitations?
They can't hurt the men of God that have the seal of God on their foreheads. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So it includes the 144,000 for sure, because we know that those are sealed. We can also look at other places in the Bible where God tells us that Christians are sealed. So it could include other, believers. But it also would definitely include, which we looked at in chapter 7, the 144,000 people that are going to be giving the gospel through the entire tribulation. So what?
So,
Yes,
I just,
go ahead.
so there's no rapture during the tribulation.
The rapture has already taken place before the tribulation starts, but these are Jewish evangelists that God seals to give the gospel during the entire 7-year tribulation. They survive. We see them alive at the end of the tribulation, but we also saw in chapter 7 a great revival of converts. But where were those converts in chapter 7? You remember?
Hiding.
Within
Not- not hiding.
And so they're not the ones in the caves?
No, those are non-believers that are hiding on the earth in the caves. If you look at let's go back there and look, chapter 7. Yeah, they are. They're under the altar. Remember, he saw a great multitude of believers in heaven who had been martyred and now are living in heaven, and they died a martyr's death during the tribulation. But we see this great revival that Jesus predicts in Matthew 24 taking place in the tribulation under these horrible circumstances. Okay, let's look at how John describes it, and then we'll be done. Let's read 7 through 10.
The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings were like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, and in their tails they had power to torment people for 5 months.
Okay, so that is a little bit more of a description. Now, I read, and so I did it, I looked at, like if you look at an insect under a microscope, this is not far-fetched at all. It actually describes what an insect can look like under a microscope. So there's that, but there's also characteristics of like trying to give us a message about the characteristics of these demons or
Like a parasite.
yeah, exactly. So what would we attach to if it's a horse prepared for battle? What would that message give us about these demons coming out of the abyss? Remember, they've been locked up for we don't know how long.
They're very fierce looking.
Okay, so they're fierce.
It's like an army.
Yep. What else?
They're strong,
Yep.
very strong.
And if they're ready for battle, it's like they've been holding back, and now they got a chance to torment people, and they're determined to torment people. Okay, what's the next character? Heads appeared like crowns of gold. So if you think about a crown,
Powerful.
okay, if the word there is victor's crown in the Greek, what does that tell us?
Conquerors.
Yeah, they're conquering.
So
Okay.
they're on a conquest, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right message.
And their faces resembled human faces.
Yeah. And so what are they trying to give us? Some sense of a person, given a personality. What about a personality would be human-like?
Intelligent.
Yep, intelligent. And part of that intelligence is going to show in the fact that they can't, anyone that's sealed, they can't bother. But they can go after any non-believers. Okay, and then hair like hair of a woman.
That's a pretty strange one.
It is strange, I agree. Again, when you look at it under microscope, like their tentacles and their stuff, there's the thickness of the hair. It could be that. It could be a seductiveness, a woman's seduction in their hair. That's why I don't have any. But so it could be something to do with that. I'm not sure. Were you gonna say something?
John perspective of his reality. Verse 9 like modern day battle helicopter.
Oh, which it could be, but it seems like he's really describing, because he uses the word like 10 times in these verses, and he also says appears to be, so he's trying to project us past that and go, these demons are, we need to understand how horrible they are. Like he said at the end of verse 13, woe, woe, woe to the earth, because what's coming is really bad. Teeth like lion's teeth.
You want to devour.
Yeah, the viciousness of a lion devouring. Those are all the messages that we definitely need to get from this and this activity, this demonic activity during this time. And then the breastplate would be what? The breastplate does what? What does the breastplate do? It protects. And so we see they have some protection to do the, that's how preserving their life. So, and then the sound of their wings like a chariot rushing to battle. What's it going to be?
Very intimidating.
Very intimidating.
Loud, overwhelming.
Yes. All of that's the right message, and it's going to be everywhere on the earth. Everywhere on the earth. The scorpion, he says that 3 times in there, so he really wants us to understand there's some impact or pain that's going to happen, and we're going to read these 3 verses, and then we are going to be done. Let's read Matthew 8, 27 to 29. We've got some examples of what that could look like.
Another thing I could add maybe is, I'm really bad with Revelation, so I'm loving this, I'm learning a lot, but I did a really intense Bible study on hell years ago.
Okay.
And one of the things I learned was that a lot of Bible translations translate different words as hell, but the one that we read in 2 Peter 2 is actually, the word in the Greek is only used that one time in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And it's the word Tartarus, which just means a prison.
Yeah.
So they translated it as hell. And so we would think of it as hell, but I think it confirms the idea of a pit. It's like a prison where they are.
Yeah, and that's
not necessarily hell.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the description.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Okay, Matthew 8, 27, 29 through 29.
The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even with the winds and the waves obey him?" When he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gardens, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. What do you want with us, Son of God?" They shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?"
Isn't that an interesting phrase? Have you come to torture us before the time?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, go ahead. Is that all?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can see that how were they described? And imagine interacting with people and this going on. How are those guys described? How?
Like demon-possessed men.
Yeah, and they were living in tombs, and they were
very fierce.
Yeah, they were violent. They were fierce. Yeah, people didn't go anywhere near them. Imagine that magnified by the population. How about Matthew 4, 23 through 24? And this is describing, it's going to say it, so we'll read that. 23 through 24.
Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought him to all who were suffering ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them.
Okay, so in this group of people that are afflicted, he talks about people that are demon-possessed, and they came to be healed from that suffering. And they are actually suffering under the possession of a demon. And what that pain is, what that suffering, that torment is like, we don't fully know, but we know that there is an internal suffering. Not just, it's just that torment. And there's times where we can go through life and we can feel the pressure of the enemy, like breathing down our necks. This is a whole new extreme. How about Mark 9, 20 and 22, 20 through 22.
So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us."
So we can imagine that this time, this is a taste of the kind of events that are going to take place all over the world. And the lack of control and all of that tormenting. Okay, so we're done there. And we'll finish the rest of chapter 9 and it will play into this. It's the next trumpet. So any other thoughts, questions?
Quick question.
Uh-huh.
If you have the seal of God on your forehead, you get spared from this?
Yes.
Okay.
Which also shows us it's an intelligent kind of has to obey, it can differentiate between a person sealed and not.
So was it only the 144,000?
Don't know.
Or
Could be. Christians are talked about as being sealed. We definitely know the 144,000 are part of that group. But to limit it and say, because that doesn't include Christians that are still on the earth. And then one other thought along with, what does that show? There's 5 months of torment, horrible torment. Yet, the 144,000 are spared and potentially other believers that are living at this time. What does that show? Protection for sure.
Well, it should show non-believers that they're being protected by God, and if you would turn your life over, then you can be protected as well.
Yes, and they can't take their own life during that 5 months. But the gospel is still going out.
Doesn't it say that they're unable to repent of their deeds?
It's going to be hard to repent because of the influence, and yes, we will get into that more, but yes.
It's just not a time characterized by repentance, maybe.
Yes, but there will still be people that will, by the grace of God, hear and become believers. Okay, we done? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your love for us. Thank you for this group. Father, there's so many things going on in people's lives, and just thank you for the strength that you provide, the sustaining trust. Father, continue to grow our faith. We want you to resolve the issues. We don't want to endure. We need your strength. We need your perspective. Help us, remind us that you have purposes through the challenges that we face, and it's affecting everybody in the room, and the impact on everyone is different. Father, help us to trust you and to walk through the challenges. Thank you that you do love us. Help us to soak in your love and to know that that is not dictated. Your love for us is not dictated by circumstances. Your love for us was shown so vividly at the cross. Thank you so much, and we love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I only have one more lesson.